Tonight we're going to talk about vibrations and consciousness. I have spoken about vibrations here and there. There's been talks on that at least a few times maybe in the last few years. So if you want to know more about it, maybe you can just check out some of our other videos. They're, posted in a catalog here and there. So, check that out if you'd like. But tonight, I guess specifically I'm going to talk about vibrations and consciousness, because there's a lot of talk out there where people use this concept, the words vibration, and it's really slimly understood. It's just one of those topics, again, in the spiritual communities where, it's just a buzz phrase. Wow, I can feel your vibrations, or, whatever, things like that. People use it as buzz phrases. But really, just so that we understand it, first, let me get out of the way the dangers of the concept of vibrations, meaning the misuse of the concept. And, like there's vibrations in the air, right? Everything has a vibration to it. I love that even though it's March, it's snowing behind me. You can see that. I told folks just this about a week ago. I said, people are like, well, there was no winter in Sedona this year. And I said, no, I'm going to have a couple of snowy days before the winter's out. And they're like, oh, no, that's not possible. It's already March. I said, no, it's got to happen because that's what I want. So it's going to happen. Now, I don't mean I'm in control of everything. I'm saying that's what I want. In my reality, the consciousness then sets up a tone, a vibration. I'm not saying, however, that we should use consciousness and say we're control freaks. We're going to control our reality, and that's one of the dangers. When it's more like you have to put things out there and say, whatever, I put this out there, but this or something better or whatever, keeping an open mind. There's a really great statement Jesus makes clearly as a master, and he says it along these lines. It's fine for you to put things out there. It's fine for you to, state what you're looking for, your creation. He says, but also keep an open mind, because I might have a different idea for you. And that's never a negative, and we have to watch, because we've been programmed. When God wants something, it's usually not good. That's what traditions and churches and families taught us. Did my beloved father, I'm just a little child, and did daddy die, mommy die? Why did they die? Well, God took them. It never sounds good, especially to a child's mind. Oh, okay. Note to self, God takes away those whom we love. That's not it at all, But that's what we've been programmed to believe. So it's kind of beautiful to hear Christ consciousness, God, an ascended master, angels, anything of light saying to us, beloveds, feel free to create. And what I always teach, remember this, don't just create what I want. I want this, I want that. I desire, I long for, nothing. It's instead, align my I with God's I, so that I become the I am. When I get in that consciousness, when I align with God, I am co-creating with God. How could you beat that? So we get into that divine I by calling in the presence of God. To feel communion with God, peace, joy, what we know God to be, what we feel God to be. And in our humility, even what we don't know what God to be, just humbly, God, here I am. And then being able to say, of my little self, I know nothing. And again, there's New Agers that don't like those kind of statements. They want everything empowered. That's because they're so insecure, they have to use extra kind of motivational tones in their voice to make things happen. I am creating this, I will do this, and I will accomplish. And that's all nice for insecure people. No offense if you're insecure. I didn't mean, to hurt your feelings, but if you're insecure, you're already hurt. So keep this in mind. Let's get rid of that insecure part of ourselves. Why don't we look at that and say, you know what? The insecure part is broken. The one that has to compensate with loud statements of, I'm creating and aren't I cool? That's such bogus. Just, wow, I see this compensatory part of me that wants to be big, and big shot and claim this and we don't need that. Instead, we say, of myself I am nothing, but with God I'm everything. And what that means is the little self that would have to boast what I'm creating. I am creating this. You don't even have to say that. You can say it, but you don't have to say it with such intensity, because catch yourself and you realize I'm compensating. It's okay to affirm. It's okay to decree. Kick butt, man. Go ahead and say things firmly at times. But it's not about how loud you say it. It's the clarity of your mind. I'll share this as an example. Some of you have heard this story. It was a recent event. I went to visit somebody while I was on my way into Unity of Sedona. It's a woman, and they said she was sick, but she was possibly going to pass away, but it was probably going to be several weeks, or at least a few weeks, but several weeks. So I stopped by, and she was clearly, the people tending to her said, yeah, she's supposed to be a few more weeks, but she's just, it's really kind of a bummer because she's, in pain, which is normal for this. And so I went in and, I saw her, and, her first words were, Michael, please help me, I want to leave. And at first I was like, yeah, I understand. You're trying to be nice and kind of hear what they're saying and just go, I understand. Then she said, no, I'm serious. I want to go. Can you help me? I want to go. And this is a precarious place to be, a situation to be in, because, there's family members there and they're kind of overhearing and listening. And I'm kind of like, she's asking me, I'm kind of thinking, wow, what is she really asking? Is she really telling me to do something physical? Which of course I'm not going to do, but it was an awkward situation to, and she was saying, please, and so on. So long story short, it took just but seconds, and I walked over to her and I knelt down, and because I wanted them to not hear too much of what I was saying, but I just said, are you serious? And she said, yeah, I want to go. I said, okay, then let's get ready. And then I just leaned into her and towards her and said, okay, listen to me carefully. And I'm not going to tell you the exact words. And in a way, it doesn't matter. It's not because I have secret rituals or whatever. Sure, to a degree, there are certain things to say and so on, to a degree. But mostly, I'm pointing out in the context of tonight, it's the faith. I didn't have to say, and by the Lord's command, you are... No, I just said, okay. And I leaned forward and I gently spoke about the presence of the Divine Mother who gave her birth through a human mother, but the Divine Mother that attended her birth is now coming into the room. Because I say so. Because you and I can call the Holy Spirit and have it happen. But it doesn't always happen. If our minds don't truly believe it, loud words or not, it's not going to happen. But learn to believe it. How? Say it louder? No. So how do I learn to believe it? By practicing a particular religion? No. Then how do I learn to believe it? Humility. The ability to say, because this is what I've learned to do in my life, and just to be able to say, there is God, and there's that Father aspect and that Mother aspect. The Mother aspect is the Holy Spirit that ancients spoke about, the Shekinah to the Hebrew people, the Holy Spirit to some people, but the Divine Mother. And I don't know of too many people that ever made the connection that the Divine Mother is the Holy Spirit, because tradition, religion made the Holy Spirit into a he pronoun. And of course there is no gender, but not, whether male or female, there's no gender. But by making it a he, it excluded people's ability to actually feel it's the Divine Mother aspect of God. There's no gender, but it's like a mother in that she's nurturing, she's caring, and so on and so on. So I called in the Holy Spirit and said, to this lady, I said, we're calling in the Spirit that was attending your birth, but also now it's coming to take you. And it's coming into this room, and I went through this and that and told her to visualize certain things that I knew were happening, and I could see it. Sure, clairvoyant and psychic and intuitive and powerful, and all those things that I can say that I am. But any of us can be, if not achieve that consciousness. It's a humility that gives me that consciousness. Honestly, it's the calling upon God, not claiming to be something special. That's the whole point. By by accepting my bowing of the little self, I become the greater self. And that's how you can change the vibrations in a room. I spoke at Unity of Sedona last week, whatever the date happens to have been. You can check that. And we talked about, at some point I ended up kind of going in the direction of in my personal life, how much did I want to show of the miracle working, because it can be a very tricky business. Miracle working can make you seem, just grandiose or arrogant or conceited or whatever, and so it's tricky. There are people I really have respected when I've seen them do unique things. John of God, for example. We're taking a crew of people in a couple of months to see John of God because of his beautiful gift in healing. You might be a beautiful healer. He's different, just a unique style, but very effective. You might be effective. I'm effective, but I still recommend him to people. And that's another way to know if you're humble is you can be good at what you do, but do you still recommend other people? I love doing that for teachers. You've heard me say, hey, if you've got the time, even if you watch me, also check out somebody like Joel Osteen, because he's beautiful spiritual guy. It's not about the Christianity. It's not about televangelists. There's a true and authentic spirit there. He does care and does believe in God, sincerely. So I love that. Therefore, I can recommend people to him because the pure spirit that's there. John of God, true, pure spirit. There are other people. There are people, I don't know if I want to name names, but there are some people that have been those who have worked with families who had loved ones pass away. Some of them are a little bit showy. Some of them, get a little bit more about themselves and selling things, but there are some that are really sincere and beautiful and very authentic and accurate. And yet, the public that has their own issues with God and miracle working went after, some of these types of people. And it's such a shame. They've gone after John of God. They've gone after me. They might have gone after you. It happens because people are so afraid. So there are vibrations in everything, and when people attack one another, it's because, and there's things on the news you hear about, it's kind of a war of vibrations. People in a dark, dense vibration want to attack people often of a higher vibration. What's really sad is when my darker vibrations in me attack my own higher vibrations, you see. And so that's a drag. That's when we're really conflicted inside. Like if you have self-doubt, here's another way to look at self-doubt. The lower vibrations of you are trying to destroy the higher vibrations. That doesn't mean I'm going to say it's easy for you to get past depression or self-doubt or anything like that, but it helps for you to recognize what's really happening. Wait a minute, what is this? Oh, this is about the voices of doubt attacking the voices of truth. Different traditions call it different things. This is the devil to fundamental Christians. This is the devil attacking me. Different traditions, but just play with the words a little and make it make sense to you. This is fear attacking love. Good news is love can't really be attacked. But until I completely align with love, the vibration of love, which is God on earth, love as we know it is the vibration of God while we're here. And if I truly am resonating in that vibration, nothing can truly attack or harm me in any way. It has no real power. But until I'm fully aligned with that, I'm still subject to that stuff. And I have to say, we're humans, so we sometimes feel the biting energy of people, psychic attacks. Sometimes you and your cultures, various people out there listening, you'll remember the evil eye, and all that. An aunt, an old grandmother, great-grandmother talking about, people used to do, evil eye and curses and those kinds of things depending on the culture. And most cultures have something like that. And it's only our doubts that have windows that create windows opening for people's stuff to get in. But even if you're pretty solid as a person, you can only take so much as a human nervous system. When I say you can only, if you're totally aligned with divinity, totally aligned, sure, you can handle more. But it really takes a lot, man. So the stuff that goes on within our own being and the stuff that happens in the world, it can really be kind of heavy. And those in the world that are so sensitive to vibrations that are subtle, at the last Sunday service at Unity, I did mention impressionistic artists where their paintings are kind of blurry or fuzzy. And that's kind of strange. It's kind of an odd, almost unattractive art because it's not crisp. It doesn't capture like a crisp beauty in terms of color, sharpness, and so on. But it has its own, which is this, that impressionistic artists are painting fuzzy, blurry because their hypersensitive minds, everything is vibrating, which is pretty profound if you think about it. That's pretty amazing. It's different than crisp. Obviously, if you have a clear, crisp mind, that's very beautiful, has its own meaning. Vibrationally, it's sharp. The other is, it's kind of, I'm so sensitive that vibrations make me out of sync. So they're vibrating. I can't crisp them up. They seem to blur because it's all vibrating. Well, to an average human being, can you imagine if, a banker, your accountant, your tax person is sitting around going, everything's just vibrating and buzzing. They can't get your numbers right. Your spreadsheets that they give you are all wrong columns because everything's just, that doesn't work really well, does it? So be practical about it. It's not great if everything seems out of control, even though really it's beautiful. But in this reality, it's not quite syncing up. The third dimensional world, within the third dimensional world, there's several vibrations, frequencies in the third dimensional world. Not to mention the fourth dimensional world, which is a completely different vibration, and fifth dimension, and so on and so on. Ascended masters have a certain vibration, humans have another vibration, but several variations of that. When you get to the level of everything from the most dense, grossly cold-blooded, whether it's narcissistic or even megalomaniac or mass murderer or psychopath or whatever it is, that's some really dark vibrations. And even that's not the darkest available to consciousness. That's why there are beings that are trapped on the other side, the proverbial hell, that are even in a lower vibration. And and bear with me on that because I like us to understand that so that we don't fear it, but bring light to it, God's light to it by understanding it. So those dark kinds of places, you hear, horror movies and stories about exorcisms. Why all those gross, dark sounds of people moaning and groaning? Because the vibrations are low, so they make these dark, gross sounds. Become afraid of it, and you've separated from it, and you then empower it. So our job is to be able to see through things like that. When a woman said to me, "Will you help me go?" there's an awkwardness for a moment that I have to deal with. Instead of just going, "Oh, this is too much, man. She's asking you to go to the other side, and that's just too weird, too freaky. What will people think?" I would agree with you. If you came to me for counseling and said, "Michael, someone asked me and I got afraid," I would have said you did the right thing. You left, you took care of yourself, fine. But for those of us who can take it, the place of social work is a dark place. Social workers might be great, but I'm talking about the work itself, the workload. Every day, surgery, emergency rooms. What a hard, heavy place at times. Children dying and you have to tell parents, or places of social work. You go in, you're hearing and seeing some of the grossest things, and there's some really gross, traumatic things happening, abuses. You can't even do anything about it sometimes. That's hard. Those are gross, dark vibrations. Do I think you should walk away? No. If you're a love-centered person, social worker in this case, God bless you, man, that you can go into those places, but be careful. You go in with your vibration, it will pull you under. Because your vibration is whatever it is, it's a human one. No matter if it's a little bit nicer than most, it's still a human vibration. Of myself, I can do nothing. My vibration, going into that vibration, I probably don't stand a chance. It will age me. I might even find myself gaining a lot of weight when I do nursing or social work. Why? Guys, come on. It's a buffer. I'm not saying everybody's overweight in these fields. I'm saying it's a buffer, and it's a good one. Because, man, if you didn't have that density of the body, the thickness of the body, you would have those energies going straight into your nervous system and snap you. Just, you'd snap. So these vibrations, this density, putting on weight is a good way to kind of buffer. Some of us will gain weight in relationships. I understand that there's a biology and aging and hormones and all, but some of it, especially if it's a lot of excessive, sometimes it's our environment, and we're gaining to kind of, even when we're children, some of us maybe we're larger, which is sad because then we're teased and all that stuff, but for some reason, our psyche says, but I would rather have this density to buffer me than none at all. Even if I have to get teased, I don't care, compared to what I'm feeling in this world. Some of us even gain weight coming into the world because the place sucks. I mean, we come in going, what in the hell was I thinking coming here? Dense, attack, aggression, competition. It can be very intense. But not if you do it the other way around. If you go in with your vibrations to the world, to social work, etc., you're kind of up creek. Don't do anything without God. So it's like saying, of myself I can do nothing. If I were you, if you're a social worker, nurse, etc., before you go into work, doctors or whatever, and you Reiki practitioner before every client, just remember, of myself I can do nothing, but I'm calling in the presence of God to go with me. So when this woman says, will you help me? I don't hear, I am going to help her. What I'm going to do is call in what needs to be called in. Always the Divine Mother. You're not a failure when you call in the Divine Mother. That's how you succeed. It does feel weird to some people. Well, shouldn't I be able to do these things? Why do I call on God? Well, it's a sad question if you have to ask that question. You don't quite understand. Of yourself who asks that question, you are nothing. The person that would ask such a question is still an ego self that's a false self. Therefore, what you're saying doesn't even make sense because it's not even a real you asking it. It's a dead you, a false you. So what I did in that case was I called in the mother and said, here's what's happening. Describe the process. Yes, I could see it clairvoyantly, feel it, know it, and asked her to be aware of what was happening. And she was nodding her head. She could see it and feel it. I didn't say, ooh, really? Let me make notes. What are you saying? There's no time for that. I only had a few minutes there, so I'm just going for it. And I said, okay, now it's coming, and this is what's happening. It's starting to cut cords to you being on the earth. It's removing you here, and and you'll be going soon. And she passed away within the hour, even though she was stated to be there for weeks. It happened almost instantaneously. And there, just a little humor to this. Her brother was there and said later, met me. He didn't know who I was, but he met me later. I met him, I think, the next day, and he said, "Nice to meet you." And I said, "Oh, and I didn't tell him about this process or anything like that. I just said, nice to meet you or whatever." But somebody that overheard it told him about it. And he meets me and says, "Nice to meet you." He said, "I have to tell you." I heard what had happened and what you did, and I thought, uh-oh. And he said, I just want you to know, after I heard that, I thought, I'm going to be really careful about what I ask from this guy. It was beautiful. It was fun because we could laugh and be okay with it, but it also was true, meaning he recognized, wow, can you imagine Jesus in the old days? What if he's in your life today? He's walking the street around us today. Can you imagine inviting him to one of your family reunions, and he does an exorcism? It's like, wow, they don't want you back at those reunions. Or if you're at some, high school reunion, you go, guess what? You got to check this Jesus guy. He does exorcisms. We always thought Charlie was a little out of it. Well, yeah, he's possessed. I mean, they're not going to invite you back because people are afraid of the amazing. They're afraid of the real stuff because it's an imposition on the false stuff. Like, why can the light cast out a demon? Because its light is such an imposition on that dark mind. And so people don't like to deal with these things. That's why subjects like sexuality, sexual abuses, people would rather hide from it, and then it's rampant. It's so rampant, it's disgusting. I remember I went to a small town and did some work of mine in small town in another country. I won't name the country. And I remember folks saying, wow, because a lot of the people had been sexually abused and it just happened to be that way. And I'm just doing my work and a lot of people are going, wow, this is the most fantastic work we've ever heard of or seen. And then they start reporting to me and they said, There once was a woman who moved to this area, and she started doing work along those lines, and they ran her out of town. And I was like, wow, why? Because it was an imposition, man, to them, because there was such rampant household sexual abuse, pedophilia, and so on, that they ran her out of town because it was an imposition. You're ruining our way. You're putting light on something that we don't want to see as dark. So as long as it's in the dark and we're in the dark, everybody's just fine. And it isn't fine. So I believe that it's really kind of sad, but that's how this works. So you hold a consciousness. When you hold a consciousness and you call God into the moment, you are saying, here's the vibrations of the moment. You call God into the moment. It's like, it's just bright. It's just intense. There's a person who, and it's perfect and pure light, the light of God. And so there's a person you might have heard of named Nikola Tesla. So Tesla, existed, lived several years ago, passed away after the Second World War, or during the Second World War, whatever year it was exactly. But he passed away. And it was interesting because during the Second World War, he was doing experiments, and he was a genius. He's the one who created a lot of what we use now as current for lights and so forth. And some would say he also invented a lot of other things and never got credit for, which is true. Somebody hijacked it and stole his patents and so forth. That happens, unfortunately. So a lot of times in this world, denser, harsher vibrations, more often than not, defeat more subtle vibrations. Then it looks like victimizers defeating victims. But it doesn't have to be looked at that way, because if we're more subtle, which is beautiful to be, but if we're more subtle, the denser ones will feed us off of it. They'll feed off of us. They'll attack and devour us, like the lions being, going after the Christians. It's kind of got that vibe to it. But if the more subtle vibes, align with God, then we don't become victims. We become so centered that even though our vibrations are subtle, we know how to kick ass when we need to, in a good, loving, tactful way. So an example would be Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah would be an example of the dense, ego-based world. So Sodom and Gomorrah were these towns that were villages, towns, cities that were out of control in all kinds of ways. Everything had gotten out of hand. People were just completely, out of control, no responsibility. There was pedophilia, there was sexual abuse, there was rape, everybody's drunk, everybody's wasted, everybody's, and they're thinking that they're amazing. They're like, wow, this is almost like Pompeii. Pompeii, it's like, wow, this is just, oh man, just orgiastic, it's just like everything's just so let go and live it up, except very dark, even compared to Pompeii and other cities like that. So Sodom and Gomorrah was way out of control. And, there was a point where a couple of people there were still light workers, and they had lived there for years, and it just was getting worse, but they still lived there, just like you and I sometimes are in relationships or situations or jobs, and or towns that are getting darker and darker and darker. And because it's so gradual, you don't even know it. So it was getting darker and darker and darker, and there were a couple people wishing that people could change. They wished their family wasn't going into the darkness. They wished friends, their neighbors weren't going into the darkness, but it was happening. All of a sudden, it says that a couple of light beings, angels or light beings, show up at Lot's door, and they knock on the door and they go in. They tell them, we've been sent by God. These are light beings or angels, whichever it is, whichever you believe in. They're beings of light. And they go into Lot's house, and people notice them. Why did they notice them? They're just people showing up. Just like a couple people show up at your driveway. They come in and say hello. They're visiting from work. People noticed them and could tell their vibration was different. People start pounding on their door, and Lot answers and says, what is it? What do you need? We saw those beings of light that entered your house. Send them out so that we can have our way with them. Which means they wanted to play out all their dark crap on those beings of light, just like people would like to do to you and I. It happens. And so Lot says, please. And I know this is going to sound disgusting, but Lot even says, you can even have my own daughters, but don't touch these beings of light, because he knew Touch my daughters, you're causing harm to a human. Touch these beings of light, and you're harming something spiritual, and you're going to cause some real problems. Big problems beyond human. And so they wouldn't let go away. So they said, no, we want the beings of light. So just summarizing the story, the beings of light finally said, we're coming out. They walked out, and the beings all kind of run to them like they're going to have their way with them, whether that's beat them up, sexual abuse, or whatever it's going to be. They make their way at them. They go after them, and the beings of light just wave a hand. They all go blind. And the beings of light say to Lot, get your things together, follow us, we're leaving. And that's that story where they leave, and as soon as they get out of town, the place is obliterated. It was nuked. It was actually nuked. It was obliterated, like boom, blasted to where nothing was left. To this day, when they go back and research the area, it's radioactive. The place was nuked. And some people will make it a geological anomaly might have happened and created a sort of a similarity to a nuclear explosion from a geological phenomenon, or others will understand these were light beings that activated some sort of a weapon. Whatever it is, the place is gone. And that's again an example of vibrations. These beings held who they are, but they were with God, not just, we're just nice people, please don't bother us. They stood in the light, wave a hand, and make them all go blind. And some people would go, God, that wasn't very nice of them. Knock it off. Just that's. I did a talk weeks ago called, like, it was something like the falsely weak and the falsely strong. Check that one out if you'd like, something along those lines. Because there's people that pretend to be spiritual and they don't even know what they're talking about. It's great that you have boundaries. It's great that you say no. Wave a hand and let light blind people that are trying to harm, so that you are doing the greater good, because Sodom and Gomorrah was not going to be saved. The story goes to say, God says to Lot, the place is going to be gone. It's just gone so out of control. It's not really God, but the gods, beings between God and us, light beings, are saying, the place is going to have to go because it's so out of control. They need to be wiped. The souls can be taken and then be processed on the other side and given another chance somehow. But the place was just out of control. And, Lot says, but you can't just wipe the place out. What if there's 100 decent people? They said, find the 100, and we won't find the 100, and we won't not wipe out the place. He looks around, can't find them. And I'm just paraphrasing, but okay, they said we're going to wipe it. Well, wait, okay, there's not 100. What if there's 20? Okay, find 20. We won't wipe it. Couldn't find 20. What if there's 10? What if there's, you see? And the light beings were like, they knew. They knew, just like we try to make excuses. Lot was trying to make excuses for something that was not going to change. People that were not going to change. I've experienced this in my life, and I've had those falsely spiritual people say, oh, but maybe they could have changed. Maybe, you guys shouldn't have done this, or you shouldn't have done, maybe you shouldn't have kicked them out of that class. I've had 5-day intensives when I taught, when I do 5-day intensives. I've had somebody show up that they were, let's say, drunk. And we sensed that they were drinking for some reason. That was just a thing they brought. They thought it was fun. It was like a couple of friends thought they'll go there and just be high or whatever. We kicked them out. And some people could go, oh, but that wasn't spiritual. I don't care what you think. I have people signing up to have an experience, and the experience doesn't include irresponsible people. It's just an example, and there were other things, harsh enough to make me make that decision. And certainly we're going to try to give people a chance to change something. But God, spirits, gave Lot a chance. Try to get them to change. They wouldn't. So sometimes you just go, you know what? Nuke it. And that's a figure of speech, of course, but it means done with it. Leave that job. Just forget it. Walk. If there's that much corruption or abuse, or if it's a relationship, sometimes you try to make some changes. You try to see if you can do this. You try to save that. Sometimes it's too far gone and you walk. Sodom and Gomorrah is a metaphor of things out of control. So how far do you want to let that go? But it represents a vibration of absolute dark density, almost like hell on earth. That's how evil, that's how dark the place was. But what do you do about it? Oh my goodness, and be a victim and let them attack? No. Stand in the light and do what you have to do. and that align with God's vibration, not just human vibration, because human vibration can't always survive something that's even darker than that. Even though you think you would because it's darker, it doesn't work that way. People that teach you and say higher vibrations always win, that's not necessarily true. I can be a decent person and have a decent vibration, but if my consciousness also has a weakness, a character flaw or a weakness that says, when people are mean to me, I just take it. I'm actually lowering my vibrations every day that I'm abused, and they're darkening theirs. It does them no good by being the thing they are devouring. It does them no good. It's the greater good for them and me to say, enough. That's it. Wave the hand, go blind, because they're already blind anyway, but go blind. It's not just a curse to them. What it is I hope by you going blind, you'll see the light, if that makes sense. Paul, who became an apostle of Christ consciousness after the time of Jesus, he was a pretty wicked guy. He made a living collecting and putting to death Christians. That's pretty sick. And he became an advocate for Christ. How did that happen? Well, one of the things that happened was he had a vision of Jesus speaking to him saying, why do you persecute me? Why are you hating light? More or less he's saying that. And Paul is like, I'm sorry, whatever. And Paul is stricken blind for the rest of his journey on this road. He's stricken blind until he gets to this place, meets up with a mystic, we'll call him a master, a mystic, who restores his vision. You see, so striking them blind is not a harmful thing. Striking them blind means, I hope this will help you see. Paul then could see. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah chose not to see. But when you say to people, goodbye or end of this, you're giving them a chance to go, I can see I lost something beautiful there. They may not do that, which is their problem. But if they do, you saved a soul by saying no. So please don't be falsely weak and victim, and don't be falsely strong either. Be humble and recognize it's not just my decision here, it's the will of God, and align with that. Remember that your power comes not of yourself. Of your little self, you're nothing. You're standing in the light of God, and that's what gives you your power. So you can say to the weather, I want to see snow this year, and it'll happen. It's a strange thing to say, but it happens. It does work. Miracle working. To be able to tether to God and walk into social work kinds of jobs, you'll be stronger for it if you say, God, be with me. That's a tough area, but only in the illusion of this world. So tethering to the light of God, you'll be able to go in and do your work and recognize those children can still become something. I see that there's pain, but they can become something. I believe it. I totally believe it. And then it'll be a change. You're going to spark light in them because you walked in and had that confidence. When I walked in and said to this woman, what's going on? Well, tell me, I want to go. Help me leave. And I said, okay, are you sure? Yes. Okay, here we go. Do you see that? Here we go is what I said. Are you ready? Here we go. And I took her out, so to speak. It's not me, but you see, I went with that. Confident. I didn't say, gee, I don't know if I can do that, twirl thumbs, because then it's not going to be effective. It's not going to be real. And I've had some people say, well, that's maybe because they had faith in you that they could do that. You also have to have faith in yourself. It can't just be because they know me, I'm a spiritual teacher, they're going to believe in me. I have to believe it too. I have to believe in the Holy Spirit. I have to believe in the power of God to do anything, including take someone who supposedly isn't even supposed to go yet. Anything can happen. And you can then speak to somebody and say, I know that your job situation can change. But what I've learned to do is I created a process that helps people integrate that change. Instead of saying, in this moment, I'm commanding that your financial situation, your job situation is going to change instantly. Well, that's cool. Let's say I do that. And I've done that and it works. But if I do that and I know that you don't change your consciousness, it's not going to really do that much good. It'll help. But you are too often going to go right back to that old situation. That's why when Jesus used the commanding word, he said, go and sin no more. He's like saying, don't go and get yourself back into the same consciousness. But what I've learned to do is say, okay, look, come with me. What's your situation? Let's look at where it's coming from. Would you like to release what created that? Great. You would? Okay, so let's do that. Once we release it, the roots are gone. The roots on that thing have been snipped, killed, which means the rest of it will die on the vine. The problem will die on the vine. And then we not only leave them with the problem going, but we say, now what would you like to plant there instead? That's covered in my Healing the Heart and Soul book. Also there's lectures and all that you can see for free on YouTube, learn more about that sort of thing. But to do your inner work, it's tracking exercise, I call it, just bringing people inside to help them uproot things. So as I'm starting to come to a close, yes, everything does have vibration. And you could say life is to some degree, is a dance, sometimes a battle between those vibrations. A dance between them is beautiful. The dance of vibration between you and a song, you and a prayer, that's a dance. Even moments where you're like having doubt, but you call in the presence of God, there's this dance. Even though I'm a little resistant, I'm willing to give, so it becomes a dance. Wrestling with it, fighting it, means I'm really resisting, or a client is really resisting. So now it's a war between high vibrations and low. And the high vibrations don't always win, because if they're there and you don't believe in them, they might weaken. If you don't know how to convey those higher vibrations to the other person, the recipient, your reaching out to them might not be taken. So it takes that developing of, I don't need to just have a momentary high vibration, nor even just a decent person vibration. I need to say, in this moment, I'm calling in something that is beyond vibration, the presence of God, which is pure light, love, energy. It's pure. So it's not subject to winning, losing. And I was mentioning Tesla earlier because he created something called the violet ray device. It used to be sold in the Sears and Roebuck catalogs in the old days. But the violet ray device, it looks kind of like an electric toothbrush, a larger version of one, but a handle with an applicator like a toothbrush on the end, except it's a skinny light bulb. And Tesla would tell people, you turn this thing on and you'll see this, the light bulb turns a pretty violet color, violet ray. Turns a very pretty violet color. And then you use it on parts of the body, okay? In application, like, you run it over parts of the body. So long story short, segue over to Edgar Cayce. Edgar Cayce mentioned the violet ray device in dozens and dozens, it's actually hundreds of readings. So even though Tesla's got nothing to do with Cayce used to be able to tune in psychically to everything that exists and then tell you which thing will do what for whom, and all that. So he recommended the violet ray device, sometimes for, ailments, inflammations, or whatever, some common things of the body. But there were cases where Edgar Cayce said to use it for demonic possession, if you could believe that. Because what he was saying was, when you have these dark entities and they are oppressing or possessing someone, the violet ray vibration, the vibration of violet, is the opposite spectrum of that which is then dark. So when you get the violet ray on the body, it's so subtle, it runs all the way through the body. It penetrates every tissue. So much so that if you have one and you apply it, let's say to this part of my chest, I can go and pick up another light bulb and it'll start glowing, confirming. I mean, I've done this many, many times. You pick up one of the other bulbs and it starts glowing violet, because it runs all the way through your body. Bone, sinew, tissue, muscle, nothing inhibits it. It goes all the way through the body. And that's an example of how high vibrations, even when we tone musically or instrumentally using our voices as a healing apparatus, when we tone, we're bringing in a vibration that's sort of like a soprano singing certain notes, shattering crystal glass. It's very similar. The vibrations of the violet ray, and our toning shatters old, stuck belief systems that have cellular structure. molecular structure. So when you do bring higher thought or sound or whatever else, it can break up old crystallized stuff. But again, what I said was, I of myself am nothing. So if I sit around going, oh, I have an amazing voice. I can make all your problems go away by just singing to you. You could have some effect. My little crystal bowls, all those things, they can have some effect. But why don't I just bring God into it as well? Why don't I ask the frequency of God to come through me and crystal bowls, me and tuning forks, me and my voice toning, whatever it happens to be. Call in the presence. Call in the presence of God, because it's not even high vibration, it's beyond high vibration. If it was a high vibration, there could be still other vibrations that could compete with it. Battle it. It's not. It's so pure in its essence, its vibration, like the violet ray, but immeasurably beyond that, that it can penetrate every thought, every issue. In that vibration, you are casting out all things, casting out demons, casting out this and that. And that's kind of what Jesus said was, go amongst the people and heal them and cast out demons. In a sense, he wasn't saying go fight those things. He was saying go and bring a new vibration, a new consciousness to these things, and anything that is unlike it will vanish. They will flee, and they do. And that means you're aligning with God and you can accomplish anything. But it's through the humility. So practice it. But don't, when I say humble, don't attempt things like this by going, hey, God, I hope I'm not bothering you. I'm just being humble here. Would you mind? You don't have to do that. You can humble just means, here I am. Let your will be done. You can say it with conviction, and you need to say it with conviction, confidence. And here we go. Like I said to that one, here we go. You don't have to play overly weak. There's a difference between weak and meek. Meek means clear and simple, not weak. That's another perversion of teachings. So practice being clear, and start with yourself in your own little space, your own little room. God, this is kind of new, and even if it's not new, that's fine too. But, try things out and say, I'm ready. I'm ready to sit, first of all, and surrender anything that is inhibiting my life in whatever way you want to do that. Then, and I'm welcoming in your pure, perfect presence. Call that presence in, but don't just call it. Try to feel it. Try to viscerally feel as though God has given you the things many people have talked about. Oh, I had this vision, I had this experience, and I saw angels and I felt this peace. Then don't wait for that to happen. Call it in. Imagine feeling those angels and that feeling of peace. Get in that center, and then from that place, God is. There's a saying from the scriptures, Old Testament Torah, surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. Have that kind of an attitude, like where you go into meditation or quiet for a sec, and you're calling in peace, 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 peace. And then you get to a point where you can say, if you can say, surely the presence of God is in this place. There's a feeling of peace. I'm not just calling it in. I feel peace. I feel joy. I feel safe, or whatever you think God to be. I feel that presence. When you feel that, then I and God are connected. My I, God's I are connected. And from that place, you can then command things to be. Request things to be, if some of you need that word, but you can co-create things to be. My annual co-creating a new life class, it's every January, and oh my God, the changes in people's lives. We even use a chart to kind of put things on there to say, okay, here's where we want to go. And we just did this, a couple months ago, 6 weeks ago. I posted mine on my desktop in my computer so I can see it. And there are half the things on there. It's only weeks late, few weeks later, and half the things on my chart are already done. And they should have taken, for some people's standards, years to manifest. Just like the woman being sick, she should have taken weeks. In God, there's no time. In a sense, there is such a thing as divine timing. That's another talk. Go look it up. You'll find me doing a talk on that. But divine timing doesn't mean delay. It has other meanings to it. But typically speaking, in God, there is no need for delay. There's no karma. You have to wait, be patient. It's not like that at all. In God, the now is where we find God. It's only in us that we need kind of some timelines and some karma and all that. That's us, not God. So when we align with God, a lot of that disappears and now can become everything. So keep that in mind when you're creating things, because I'm just going, even just yesterday, today, I looked at it and went, wow, this is just astounding. And I do this every year, this chart, and I practice it throughout the year. But my God, look at this. All these things, half of these things are already done. And it's in days that should have taken years. So I think these things are beautiful. And I notice in my life, I'm going to, in my own way, I'm going to come out more and more back to that life where I more and more am bold about saying we can do these things. I shied back a little bit for various reasons, but I'm just going to kind of step back into it. I still did do wonderful, I love my life and met nice people and did do great talks and workshops and all that. That's been still great. But I shied back and had a little bit simpler life the last handful of years, which is good. But at the same time, while I'm here, Jesus said, while I'm here, I am the light. And if I'm the light, I'm going to bring light. So, like it, run and hide under a rock, but I'll probably bring the light there as well. So I just feel inclined to step up a bit more. I don't know how much, I can't say, but I just know that I'm coming forward a little bit more, and not just confidently, but directly. I'll just be a little more direct with some of these things. And I partly can only do that. Partly, it's God's blessing, but it's also because you guys are holding space for that. And I appreciate that. If you weren't holding space for it, I would not be attached to that, and I would do something else a little more, a little more tame or back off a little. But you guys are holding space for it, so out I come. And I'll come out as much as you'll allow me to come out. So we'll see how that goes. We'll dance the dance, okay? We end with saying this: change what you can, accept what you can't, and walk. All right? Thank you so much. Peace be with all of you. Bye-bye.